I'm super excited to welcome my friend and sex expert, as I like to call her, because she really is one, Dr. Sheva Marcus, to the Terry Cole Show. Today, we're going to be talking about sex, baby, and lots of other things, and Dr. Marcus's new book as well. I'm going to give you a little bit of background. Dr. Marcus has been doing this for a long time. I really just call her Sheva, but I think it's cool that she has a PhD, so I like to call her doctor.
But I
She's the
like it when you call me Batsheva.
Of course you do. She is the founder, though, of Maze Women's Sexual Health. So they have an office in Purchase, New York, and an office in the city. And this is literally the country's largest independent women's sexual health center. So for 20 years, she's developed and overseen the treatment of thousands of women from age 18 to 81. Because here's the thing about sexuality, which we're going to get into today. Hormones, sex, sexuality, as you grow, as you change, as you have life cycles, it all changes. And the reality is, pretty much nobody is talking about it except Batsheva, a licensed clinical social worker with master's degree in public health, a master's degree in social work, and a master's degree in Jewish studies because you needed more degrees, and a PhD in human sexuality because, again, you were bored, I guess. Dr. Marcus has been profiled in numerous publications, New York Magazine, Lenny Letter, frequent guest on TV, radio. You've seen her, and you guys, if you follow me, you might have seen me and Batsheva, we've been doing some lives together, answering your questions, and the response has been so overwhelmingly positive that we decided to do a whole episode on this because, very exciting, Batsheva has a book coming out right about now called Sex Points. So we're going to be talking about all the sex things. Welcome, my friend, to the show.
Oh, it's such a joy to be here, Terry. Really, you know how everybody always says, "Oh, it's nice to be with you." I really mean it this time.
You're like, I say that when I don't mean it, but today I really do.
Yeah, because I love your energy. I love, your followers' questions. It's always amazing.
So they were so into it. When we were doing our lives, we couldn't even stop. People just kept asking questions because here's the thing, this whole topic of sex, sexuality, hormones, and how it impacts us. I became really interested in this going through menopause. And I was like, hey, man, you know who doesn't tell you shit about this? Anybody. I, in my mind, I was like, it's going to be easy. In my mind, I've been 28 forever. There is not going to be a problem. I am physically fit. I'm all the things. I'm happily married. I've got a great sex life. What? And then what happened where you're like, oh my God, why does it feel like someone's stabbing me in the vagina when I have sex? That can't be normal. What is the deal? And so I've been talking about this and doing research about this. And then you and I met through Michelle Goldblum, a mutual friend of ours. And she sort of did this thing, like sometimes when people do this, they do an intro without asking you if you want an intro. I was writing my book, slammed out of my mind. And then there's this intro. And I was like, hey, man, I'm too busy to meet this lady. Like, you want me to help your client? Well, I was all like bitter and judgy. And then, but I love Michelle. And I knew down deep, if she put us together, it really wasn't for her. It was because she knew we would be a good fit. And then when we met, I was like, oh my God, I love you. And let's keep talking about sex, menopause, babies, life cycles, what happens to the body, neuroplasticity, and fantasies. I mean, these are all the things we're hitting today. So why don't we just start with, I really want to know why you wrote this book, Sex Points. Why did you write this book?
Well, I just want everybody listening to know what a mutual love fest this is because, also Michelle also, she sort of tossed us together and I'm like, oh my God, this woman sounds amazing, but I don't know. Anyway, we totally loved each other. So that was a home run. And I don't love that many people. So why I wrote this book. I wrote this book, Terry, because nobody, as you said it, nobody is talking to women about the fact that your sex life is not this binary on and off. It's not like what's broken, let's fix it. Let's see what is missing, which is what women always think. Like, what is the problem? Batsheva, fix it. But it's much more like an amalgam of so many issues that are going on in your life, in your body, in your brain. And thinking about your sex life from the position of both the psychological, Like, what is happening with my feelings about myself and my body and my relationship and the time I have and my anxiety or my depression? And being able to think about it from the physiological perspective. What drugs am I on? What drugs should I be on? What's happening to my hormone profile? Those things are all working in tandem. And the sooner we women realize that our sexuality is really a combination of all of those things, what I call points. We're getting points from lots of places and we're losing points from lots of places. And the sooner we realize that we need a 100-point threshold to hit good sex, and it's doable for every single woman, it's just a little bit of know-how that you need to have, the happier people will be. So I'm sitting around in my world hearing, sex therapists go on and on and on about how, it's about the relationships and you should keep talking, and which drives me insane. Not to say the relationship's not important, Terri, but there's plenty of people like you, for one, for example, who are a great relationship and the sex just started sucking, So
Hmm.
when I hear that, oh, we'll do the communication and the sex will follow, it makes me see red. And when I see doctors sort of tossing testosterone at women and not explaining all the other factors that are involved, it's not helpful. So our center does both. We have tremendously fabulous effects because of that. And I thought it was time to write this book and bring it to the public.
Okay, so let's go back to, you said we all need to know about our hormone profile. So tell, because I guarantee you, people listening or watching on YouTube literally are like, what the hell is that? So just break it down a little bit. Like, what is that?
So I think most women listening have probably heard that they have estrogen. And estrogen is a hormone. And it's a hormone is, by the way, if anybody's interested, is something that's made in the body and used in other parts of the body. That's the definition of a hormone. Should anybody ever be interested in the yeah. So most people understand that they have estrogen, and that as we're younger, we have more estrogen. And the estrogen has dramatic effects on our brain, on our bones, on our hair, on our skin, on our cognitive ability, and on our sex drive. And on when I say our skin, it has to do with how wet we are. And you're going to feel that in your vagina as well. So we know about the estrogen. And we also know that there's been huge controversies about giving women estrogen as they get older. And there are some wonderful books out there. There's been a lot of really terrible misinformation, Terri, about not using estrogen.
Hmm.
And we could do a deep dive. We could do 2 hours just on the estrogen myths that have been ridiculously fostered on women by men in this country. There's
Hmm.
a wonderful book called Estrogen Matters, which I highly recommend to people to read if you're interested in estrogen. I think in general, though, Terri, most women and men are not as aware that women need testosterone also. We think of testosterone as a male hormone, and it's true. Men have way more testosterone than we women have, but we need what we have. And that goes down as you get older. And it doesn't matter how fit you are, how well you eat. Well, at least so far, we haven't been able to figure that out, Terri. You're a
Hmm.
perfect example. You're in amazing shape. You take care of yourself. But you know what? Your testosterone starts dropping as you get older. And it seems like the testosterone really is needed in order to have a libido, that small amount of testosterone. So, but you need to be dealing with somebody who actually understands this. I mean, I really do outline in this in the book because I feel like that's one of the areas where people are just so clueless, and there's
Right, but
so many.
it's
There's
so unique. Like each person's blood work is unique to them, where they are in their life cycle, right? Where they are in their, what hormones are in their body. So the levels are important, right?
The levels are really important, and we don't really have a lot of data about the levels that are right for women because nobody ever looked at like women's libidos. It was never taken seriously, Terri. So,
Yep.
women will sometimes come in to our practice and say, I already had my testosterone checked and it's normal. And I will start to laugh because that just means it's normal for not a dead person, right? Like the doctor just wants to make sure that you have some testosterone, right? Because anything is normal. But we realize at this point that you need a certain amount to have a good libido. And that amount is a little different for each woman. So some of this is subjective, but there are some ranges. So testosterone is another one. I'll throw in one more and then I'll stop on the hormones. Although we can talk about other parts of the hormones, DHEA and SHBG. I guess I'm lying. I should mention two others.
So slow down. DHEA
Uh huh. And
and
SHBG.
So
So
tell us
S
what those are
so DA
slowly.
yes, I will try. DHEA is the what I'll call the mother hormone. It's the hormone that transfers in your body to estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. And it's like a precursor hormone, mother hormone. And sometimes we will use that for women in order to get their body to start producing more testosterone.
Mm,
We'll do that more, I would say, with women maybe post child when their hormones just seem to be a little bit off. They just need kind of to just a little jump start. It's like I call it like the BB gun to testosterone, which is more like a cannon, although
mm,
that scares people when I say that. So I don't. But basically, SHBG is just a useful precursor hormone. And sorry, DHEA is that useful precursor hormone. And then the other thing I may mention, which is not actually a hormone, it's more of a protein, is called SHBG, serum hormone binding globulin. And that's a protein, this is really important for you to know, that binds up your testosterone. So it makes the testosterone not usable for your body. And for example, birth control pills will raise your SHBG quite high. And so even if you have decent testosterone, your birth control pills may be making it not usable in your body.
mm.
So I don't want to, I'm not giving a slam to birth control pills here, Terry, because I think they can be incredibly helpful to lots of women. But all I'm saying is that these hormones are critically important. They all affect each other, and realizing how central they are to a woman's sexuality. Here, I'll tell you one analogy that always makes everybody laugh. If you see two teenagers, two 17-year-olds who are in line in a movie theater who cannot keep their hands off each other, right? Like pre-COVID anyway, right? They're all over each other. You wouldn't say, "Oh my God, they must have just had this really meaningful conversation." Right? That would not be your first reaction, right? Your
Right.
first reaction would be like their hormones are raging, right? We get it. We totally
Sure.
get that hormones are, but somehow you turn to women who are 30 and 40 and 50 and 60, and it's all about, oh, it's the relationship. Oh, they haven't spent enough time together. And that really makes me a little crazy.
Well, part of it is that it's twofold, that those things are important too, and yet the thing we know those things, we talk about those things, the physiological, the medical, because I had been looking for somewhere to I was like, someone has to be figuring this out. It can't just be me talking. And I like my doctor here. She's, like East West kind of cool. But it really wasn't helpful until you go somewhere where when I went to Maze as a client and had the blood work done and was able to go, oh, okay, so this is what's missing. All right, let's try these things. Let's see how it feels. And I felt a difference in my body and in my life and in my libido and all of the things that I wanted. But the real deal was I'm incredibly resourceful. Like I can figure out literally anything. So the fact that it took me as long as it did to figure it out, and it just happened that we got connected, and that's how I ended up at your center. I imagine, I know from my women, from my crew online, from you've been in my Thrive Hive group, like we know that this is a major problem. So what I also want to say to people, you who are listening, this book is a perfect starting place to get the basics that no one is talking about or teaching so that you can be your best advocate for yourself. And listen, this is not just if you're going through menopause. This is if you want better orgasms, if you're curious about vibrators, if you're interested in dildos, if you want to understand how sexual fantasies, which is our next topic, impact the neuroplasticity of the brain. All of this stuff is in this book, and it's something that it's a part of you, right? Your sexuality and your sensuality is a part of you. And I do believe as women, we have been habituated to just like suck it up, like this is just how it is. And in talking to my friends from home who were all the same age and going through this, and they're all very interested in what I'm doing as the solution, because they're all having these experiences where you go to the doctor and they're like, you have, one of my friends was like, I think they said I have vaginal atrophy. What the hell is that? So what the hell is that, Bathsheba?
It is what kills me is Terry, is that that's so common. Like every single woman who's not on estrogen past the age of, I would say, 50 is going to have vaginal atrophy. Now, if she's not having any kind of sex or putting anything into her vagina, she may not know she has it. It means that the vagina is thinning because your vagina is incredibly hormonally mediated, and that just means that it's very sensitive to hormonal changes. It needs hormones. Your vagina needs hormones. So even if you're somebody who doesn't want to take estrogen systemically in your whole body, and understanding the difference between estrogen that's systemic, that goes through your entire body, and estrogen that is just local, that just stays in your vagina, is important. But even if you don't want to use systemic estrogen, and there are women who can't or really choose not to, your vagina needs estrogen. And so there's a local vagina, there's local estrogen that you can use in your vagina, because what happens is, you can use lubricants. Lubricants help make things wet at the moment. But the mucosa, the skin inside the vagina, it gets very erythemic, like it gets thin and tissue papery without not enough estrogen, and it starts to have little cuts, and it just feels like Terry said way back a few, whatever, how long ago, how it feels like knives. Like it shouldn't feel like that. So there are lasers that are now being used if you're somebody who doesn't want to use estrogen, or the idea of putting something in your vagina regularly just sort of pisses you off. You don't want to deal with it. There are lasers for that too, but you don't have to live with that kind of pain. And that idea that you go from doctor to doctor and they either dismiss you or they just say, well, that's how it is. For the younger women listening who have pain, you often see also like they can go from doctor to doctor to doctor before they're diagnosed with vaginismus or vulvodynia. And now I always joke around, Terry, that they're coming up with more and more complicated names for all these women's pains issue, because they're hoping women won't come talk to them about it because the names will be too complicated to say. So urinary symptoms of menopause, that's the new name for menopause. If you want to go into the
Stop.
doctor, I swear to you, urinary symptoms of menopause. I'm like, are you kidding me? That poor woman. Can't you just come and say, hey, doc, I'm over 50. I need something in my vagina.
Right. Help. How about that? Can you help? That's the question.
Exactly.
All right. So moving into, let's talk about neuroplasticity, shall we?
Oh, yes. Let's talk about neuroplasticity.
And how it is related, because this was one of the topics that we wanted to hit about. Tell me, sexual
Okay.
fantasies and neuroplasticity. Yeah.
Right. So, once upon a time, I used to tell women, I need you to fantasize and I need you to read erotic books. I need you to start watching some erotica, because felt like that part of their brain just wasn't being used. And once I started doing research into the understanding how the brain works and neuroplasticity, I had an aha moment, because parts of your brain that you are not using, it's called pruning. The neurotransmitters in those parts sort of shut down. You don't need them. You're not using them. They shut down. So if you're not, for example, using your math part of your brain, you're going to get less good at math, right? So it's not just that it's the practice of those particular pieces. It's that whole part of your brain. It's getting more blood coming through it. The neurotransmitters are firing off. They're communicating with each other. And you can actually rebuild parts of your brain, which we didn't used to realize. Like, we thought of brains as like a machine that was there and it just was. And sometimes we talked about brain cells dying, but we didn't realize how much the brain can actually get rejuvenated. So one of the things I often talk to women about is the fact that you need to learn to use your erotic brain, and you need to exercise your erotic brain. And women sometimes think I'm crazy when I start with them, because they're like, fantasizing isn't something you work on, right, Terry? Fantasizing is something that happens to you. We have this crazy mentality about sex in general. Desire is something that happens to you, fantasizing is something that happens to you.
But
It is
just like,
just,
but Bathsheba, it's just like people think that about the fantasy of love. Well,
yes.
it should just all be natural and easy and happen magically. I'm like, have you ever been in a long-term relationship? Because that shit is a ton of work.
Oh
And if you
my
don't
God.
do it, it dies. So,
That's it. If you don't do it, it dies. If you don't use your vagina, you're going to lose your vagina. If you don't use your sexuality, it's going to be much harder to find. Now, I don't want to give people like, you can find it, you can do this. I don't want people to feel discouraged. It's very similar to the erotic part of your brain. You need to actually start fantasizing and reading. I find that reading erotica is often really good for women, or listening to erotica more than even watching, because women like to build the way people look in their own head. And I feel like
Mhm.
women respond better to audio, actually, often. Men respond more to visual cues. Some women love visual erotica, and I think that's great. But for the women who don't, look, erotic stories online far surpass men's pornography. So just, that's the women's pornography, which is
Well, good.
amazing,
So
actually.
so you'll give us some stuff that we can put in the show notes, some ideas.
Absolutely, absolutely. But I do need to say that don't be surprised if at the beginning it feels a little like work. Like, it is a little like work, Pull out your book every morning and read something and find something that turns you on and make a mark on it. But you'll start finding that it's easier. And the idea is to sort of transfer it to your own brain so you can create it by yourself. And the other thing, Terry, that I really do need to say is that women have to ding their fantasies. They need to stop deciding what's appropriate to fantasize about. Where the hell did we come up with this, Terry? Like, where did we start not realizing that there's a differentiation between our fantasies and what we want in reality? Because they're not the same thing. They're totally different. And it is your yeah, I'm sorry. I'm just going
So
on and
so
on down my rabbit hole. But yes.
but you're saying with the fantasies that like we have a lot of judgment and feel like it's wrong if we think this, or if we fantasize about this, then either it means we're gay, or it means that we want to leave our spouse, or it means whatever the hell it means. Like we're twisted in some way. Um, and I think that it is important to give people not just permission to work on fantasizing, because here's the thing. If someone is like, I remember being younger and I would have like some weird boyfriend who'd be like, tell me your fantasy. And I was like, look, I have no idea. Get out. I do not know. So it's way better, because a lot of times if you
I used to
haven't,
tell them my fantasy. I used to
of
make
course
one
you
up
did.
on the spot. Yes, right.
Of course you did. But do you know what I mean? There's almost like this pressure where if you're listening, if you're watching and you're like, I don't friggin' know. The thing is, if you spend time in that sensual and sexual part of your brain by doing exactly what Betchev is saying, start just with erotica. Just start reading a passage or start listening. Find something online. Go to the show notes of this show. We've got a bunch of resources for you. Put it in your headset. It's just something for you, because being sexual, I think that there's a lot of limiting thoughts and beliefs that being sexual is about being in a relationship and sort of only that. And I think you and I both, I know, we both feel very strongly that being self sexual is a whole incredibly important thing. Yeah.
Oh my God, yes. I feel like sex for one is no different than sex for two or three or four. You want to be in touch with your inner sexuality because it makes you feel more alive, and because it connects you to some of the pleasure of being alive. Absolutely. So I'm always saying to women, when I talk about sex, I am not just talking about sex with a partner. I'm talking about the ultimate center of who you are. Um, yeah. And I think you're so right. Like, women they just, they feel shamed of their fantasies. And I need to tell you, women will say to me, they feel like they're being disloyal. They feel like they're being disloyal to their partner if they're fantasizing about somebody else. And I'm like, are you freaking serious? Like, you're been with this person for 20 years, 30 years. You think to tell me you're going to be fantasizing about this same person for 50 or 60 years? What? Give me a do you, and let's be honest about, do you think that the only person he ever thinks about is, or she ever thinks about, is you? Like, that is just absurd. Now, you get that energy, you do your flirting, you do your fantasizing, you do your, what you do that turns you on, and then you come back to your partner and your sex life is better for it. Your sex life by yourself or your sex life with your partner. And that's how it should be. You should be using the whole world as tools for that. And, um,
Yeah.
I just, do you have a minute for me to say a word about monogamy and women and
Well,
monogamy?
wait, I want to just go back to the
Okay.
neuroplasticity of the brain, because we didn't get to that part with how fantasizing. Did we talk about?
I think we did, but I can repeat it so that what happens when you start fantasizing, and at first it does feel like work a little bit, but then you start finding it gets easier. And the reason you start finding it gets easier is because that part of your brain is now firing up much easier.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, it doesn't take, 4 minutes until you start feeling that tingly arousal thing going. All of a sudden now it takes 30 seconds or 25
Hmm.
seconds, or it starts happening when you see something and you're not even so conscious of it until you realize what's going on. And that
Yeah.
ability to flip on the arousal and off, to use that part of your brain, is so important. And again, everything plays off. If you have the right hormones, it makes using that part of your brain so much easier. If your hormones are totally gone, it's harder to activate that part of the brain. And yet it's you still need to work on it even if somebody gives you the hormones, right? It's not like it
Yeah.
doesn't automatically happen. So,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah. Yeah. All right. So you wanted to talk about monogamy. We do have time. So let's hit that.
just because I think it touches on this fantasy thing a little bit, we have this myth in our society that men are better with monogamy than women. Sorry, that women are better with monogamy than men. We have this myth that like men are the wanderers and women are, they're fine, hearth and home. They're going to be okay with one partner. The data now is starting to suggest otherwise, and that women have a really hard time with monogamy. As a matter of fact, they have such a hard time with monogamy that their desire drops. But men, I feel like they can speak to this. So they can whine about it, they can complain about it, they can make jokes about it. They can talk about needing to fantasize and use porn, and they're fine. And then they're fine having sex with the same person. But I feel like with women, they feel so guilty about the fact that they are maybe turned on by somebody else, the fireman down the block, and not
Hmm.
their current
Hmm.
partner, that they just shut down entirely. And we think of women as being not that interested in sex, when in reality, maybe they're just having trouble with being with the same partner. And that's okay. Because I feel like if we could address that and acknowledge it as women, then we can find solutions and we can, be stepping it up and doing the fantasy things and doing the flirting things and tipping into our own, sexiness and finding the things that make us feel sexy, or trying to see our partners in a new and different kind of way. So, I just think it's worth saying, and it sort of connected into that fantasy piece because I feel like it's so important for women to acknowledge that it's really okay if you've been with the same partner for 10 years and you're feeling like, it's hard to find my mojo. I'm like, it is hard. Terry's
Hmm.
talking about it being hard to be in relationships. It's hard to be in a long-term sexual relationship, but you can do it and it's worth it when you can do it.
Yes. But part of that whole thing, too, though, is becoming secure enough within the relationship that you can share this part together, that you know this is a fantasy, and that if you share each other's fantasies, or if you act things out or role play or whatever the thing is, that it doesn't have to threaten the relationship. And I think that part is really hard, because what I find is that couples, you have to really want to master communication. Like, you have to want to master it. You work on it. And I think if you're healthy and you've both had therapy, it's easier to be like, okay, I want to have this, let's talk about this. Is everything okay? Or, or should we do this or should we do that, or what's going on? Even with the changes. Because I think that's, in for me in my life, being in a very happy, very sexually active marriage for many, many years, and then coming up against this shift in hormones that made sex actually painful. I I was so torn. Even though Vic and I talk about everything, I didn't want to reject him. I didn't want to hurt his feelings. I didn't know exactly what was happening, but I was like, but this is not normal. Like something is not happening here that should be happening. And I mean, we did finally talk about it, but it's almost like we've had such a good thing. I just kept thinking like, oh, it's just going to come back. Like, it's just a moment. I'm just busy, or my mom was sick, or this was happening, or that was happening. And then when I really started doing the research, I was like, no, my hormones have changed. And then I started really looking online, and there is some stuff out there if you're looking for it. And now, thank God, you wrote this book, Sex Points, where literally every single person listening and watching, it doesn't matter how old you are. If there is anything you think that you don't know about having a more fulfilling sex life, sexual life, sensual life, physical life, right? All of it is literally in this book. So I really do encourage you because it is my go-to. I've been telling everyone in the world to buy it because it's exactly what I needed for so long, all in one book, understanding the hormones, figuring out how to get empowered in your own life. And so we don't have to wait for someone else, like just like everything else, right? We are literally the ones we've been waiting for. We are. We're doing it for ourselves in becoming empowered, just like everything else. So I really do encourage you guys. So, where can people get the book? Tell me that.
It's everywhere books are sold. You got Amazon, you got Barnes and Nobles, you got the indie booksellers. If you want, it's easier to go just to my website. It'll take you to those places, Dr. Batsheva. And yeah, and I'd love to hear people's thoughts. And I, from your mouth to God's ears, Terry, I just hope women are empowered by this book. I mean, that is why I wrote it. And I want women to feel like their sexual health is in their hands. It's doable. It's not some crazy thing they can't get to. It's not that there are some sexy people and not sexy people. We
Right.
all have our sexy, I promise you. And go for it because it changes the way you feel about yourself and it changes your relationship. So it just changes your life.
It really, really does. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Deep, deep bow of gratitude, respect, love. I super appreciate you spending so much time with us. And I hope everyone in the world buys this book, Sex Points. Go get it. Dr. Batsheva Marcus.
Thank you so much, Sherry. Love you.
Love you too.